Welcome back to Season 2, Episode 3 of Echo Ekoji with Joe Gotchy and me, Andrea Chapman. Our goal is to explore Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, and we are excited to share our insights with you throughout 2024. Ekoji Buddhist Temple, situated in Fairfax Station, Virginia, offers both in-person and streaming Sunday services at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, as well as Dharma Breeze sessions led by Reverend Kurt Rai via Zoom. For access to these services, visit ekoji.org. Joe, what else would you like to tell our listeners about Ekoji?
Thank you, Andrea. Ekoji is one of 60 temples within the Buddhist churches of America and follows the Jodo Shinshu tradition. Rooted in Japan 800 years ago, Shin Buddhism is practiced at Ekoji, aims to make the essence of the Buddhist path accessible to all, much like our founder, Shinran Shonin. Our core practices include listening to the Buddha Dharma, or teachings, taking refuge in Amida Buddha, and leading a life of gratitude and selflessness. Notably, Shin Buddhism is non-monastic and welcomes families. Andrea, I think it's time for you to introduce our third guest for 2024.
Thanks, Joe. It's my honor to welcome Wyatt Spage, an esteemed member of the Ekoji Sangha, who will provide us with deeper insights into the Ekoji community. Welcome, Wyatt. Could you please share a bit about your background with us?
Yes. So I first started, the first time I came to Koji was in summer of 2019 when I went to a meditation service. And I really enjoyed it. I had gotten introduced to Buddhism back in my junior year when I took a world religions course. And I had driven past Ekoji like a million times. It's on my way to my grandparents' house. And I'm like, what's going on in there? So I think I'd gone on your website and like saw when you had meditation services. I then went to an actual like service in like the fall of 2019, back when Reverend Hayashi was still there. I'll never forget it. It was the pet service. And then when I was off in college, I don't think you guys really had the online option as much back then, or at least I just wasn't aware of it. And so I kind of had like stopped attending. I still like identified as a Buddhist, and I went to I started during the pandemic attending the online services more and more and more. And ever since then, I've just sort of gotten more and more involved. And right now I'm in the teaching in the Dharma School, and I am the president of the senior YBA. So
very good. Well, welcome to Echo Ekoji, Wyatt. In a poignant article for Ekoji's January 2022 newsletter, while you were still a student at the University of Mary, Washington, you mentioned, and I quote, "In light of all the suffering caused by COVID-19, I began to fall back on my faith," end quote. Could you elaborate on what you meant by that statement and share your journey to Ekoji? Were you born into a Buddhist family, or did you discover and embrace the religion later in life?
yeah, so I was raised Methodist, and I was confirmed Methodist when I was in my sophomore year of high school. And I was pretty religious, and I've always been very religious. I think religion really offers a good structure for me. It's something I feel like I need. But during the pandemic, I was really struggling because it was just a really tough time mentally. You know, the pandemic was hard on so many people with the loneliness and whatnot, and people felt so isolated, and it was really hard to find any sort of comfort and solace. And I feel like in that time, I sort of, found it hard to find the structure that, religion and that Buddhism can really offer. And so I was just sort of lost and adrift, really. I think the thing that brought me back to Ekoji was at this time, the one thing that I had really struggled with Buddhism was the belief in God. I really wanted to believe in like a higher power. And Buddhism, we don't really like have that. It's something we don't care about, We were described as non-theist. And I remember one time when I was sort of going out for one of my late night walks, I was just thinking about Buddhism. I just sort of like let it go. Like, I don't know if I could relate to a God, because he knows everything. It'd be like this ant trying to relate to a supercomputer. So I just sort of did the Buddhist thing of letting it go. And that really, it was transcendent almost,
Thank you very much.
Wyatt, in the same article, you highlighted the absence of a Buddhist student club despite the university offering a class on Buddhism. What
Mhm.
inspired you to take on the challenge of forming such a club? And were you successful? And if so, what insights did you gain from that experience that might benefit a Koji?
Yeah, so this is my senior year of college, and I guess I should mention that I went to University of Mary Washington, which is a very small school in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I was a pretty devout Buddhist at this time, and we didn't have a Buddhist club. In fact, we had no clubs for non-Abrahamic religions. And I know that people were very interested in Buddhism. The Buddhism classes were filling out, like there was no tomorrow. And so I was like, well, why don't we start a club? And I proposed this to a teacher, and he thought it'd be a bit difficult just because like there aren't that many actual Buddhists at this small university. But I sort of proposed as being like a place for people, for non-Buddhists and Buddhists, to come together and sort of study and engage with the Dharma. And I will admit it was difficult. We have these club fairs. I think most universities have them, where people, you set up this tent, and you show who you are. I still have our like big sign that we had. It's in my closet, but people came up and people were very interested, but it was hard to get people to retain and actually come to the club, because I feel like when people see a club that's centered around religion, they think it's very dogmatic. They think they're trying to convert them. And that really wasn't my goal. My goal was just to get greater awareness of the Dharma. So we really did struggle on that part. I do think I've had a lot better success with the Young Buddhist Association and Ekoji. We have like 20 members right now, a lot of members. And it's been growing exponentially. And it's been really great to see people bring like their friends in. And so I think those connections are very important, because I feel like at UMW, people were sort of clicky, but with Ekoji, people are much more open, I feel.
That's wonderful. We are so grateful for your efforts in revitalizing Ekoji's Young Buddhist Association, or the YBA.
Mhm.
Could you shed some light and share with us why this initiative was so important to you? Maybe provide us with a status update, or outline the future plans for the group.
Yeah, so I'm actually really proud of this group. I have to say shout out to Nick Karen for I remember we would like go out to dinner sometime and be like, we need to start up a YBA. And I was like, that's a good idea. And so really what I think we noticed was that there was a lot of young people who come to the temple. I feel like the ages that come to the temple are usually like, middle-aged person, and nothing wrong with that. Love you, Andrea. Um, and like we have, a lot of younger people that are sort of interested in Ekoji. And we noticed that they didn't really have anything like strictly for them. And so right now the club is, like I said, 20 members. We have our book club meeting coming up. So we're reading like books and discussing them. So we read Thich Nhat Hanh's The Heart of the Buddhist Teachings, really good book, blew my mind. And right now we're reading Discovering Buddhism in Everyday Life by Bishop Marvin Harada. It's also been really good. It's basically just a collection of his Dharma talks. As for plans for the future, Nick and I have been talking about going up to visit the New York Sangha. And I know we are also planning on doing some other sort of retreaty stuff. I think we're going to do also more like community action sort of stuff. So last month we did volunteering with Anna Sudis's community kitchen. And I think it's really important to make sure that our temple is involved in sort of more philanthropic stuff.
Wyatt, how do your political interests intersect with your spiritual beliefs? Do you see parallels between Buddhist principles and your political views? And do you consider yourself an engaged Buddhist, capable of navigating today's highly partisan political landscape?
Yeah, so I'm really glad you mentioned engaged Buddhism. That's definitely something that I identify with. I definitely see how Buddhism can help our sort of, messed up politics that we have right now.
Yeah.
I think like one principle that I always like to think about is interconnectedness. I think in America, we live in a very individualistic culture, and that's really harmful. People are really isolated nowadays. They don't have communities, they don't really have societies that they're in. And I think if we were more engaged on like just thinking bigger. So right now I'm working for AmeriCorps, and a lot of stuff we do is like anti-poverty stuff. And we oftentimes have a very like narrow view of poverty, of it being just like a lack of money. Well, we need to think bigger, and interconnectedness is a huge part of this. You know, like what do they say? Like a harm against one is a harm against all. You know, so that's basically where I'm
Yeah.
thinking about this. You know.
Thank you.
Given the diversity in Buddhist backgrounds, do you observe a noticeable difference between individuals who are born into Buddhist families and those who choose to embrace the tradition later in life? And how might these variances impact their understanding and practice of Buddhism, in your opinion?
Yeah, I definitely think there is a difference between the way who people were raised in it versus people who were converted to it later in life. I find that, so I mentioned Nick Karen, a friend of mine who was raised in Buddhism, and we definitely, me and him engage in the Dharma in different ways. Um, I don't necessarily know how to like put my finger on the differences. It's just one of those things that you can just sort of notice without necessarily putting words to it. And I definitely wouldn't say that like one is better than the other or anything like that. Both have stuff to teach each other. You know, I've often heard of like, have you ever heard of the phrase like the zealotry of the convert? Oftentimes the people who choose to come to church, you know, the ones who are actually like, they're the ones that are the most like zealotous about like, it means this. And there's maybe a little bit more dogmatism to it than people who are raised with and feel more comfortable and like seated in their identity. Whereas people who convert maybe have to, you know, feel like they have to prove something like I'm a real Buddhist. Like, I definitely feel like it's just like a little bit awkward to mention. But when people pass me our religion, I'm usually a bit sheepish to tell them I'm Buddhist because I feel like, I don't know, they might be like judging me like, oh, white Buddhist, you know, there's a lot of like connotations around there that aren't necessarily positive that I feel like are a little bit embarrassed about, you know.
Wyatt, as a young white male, embracing
Yes.
a tradition deeply rooted in Japanese culture, could you share your experiences regarding cultural exchange, interaction, and acceptance within the Ekoji community?
So I definitely have gotten off on the nicer side because Ekoji is a very diverse Sangha. We have a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. You know, not just white and Japanese people, but like people from who are, you know, African American or Arab American and so on and so forth. And so having that diverse Sangha, you know, you don't necessarily stand out. Whereas I feel like, you know, I've had Nick tell me about like Sanghas on the West Coast where it's like 90% Japanese and there's a few white people sitting in the background, sort of, you know, we're here, you know. But Ekoji has been very great for me because of that. And I've always been sort of, you know, interested in Japanese culture. You know, it's something that I think is very interesting. I took Japanese in college, and I was in the Japanese conversation hours. And so, you know, there's something sort of cool I've always found, you know, like, oh, I'm practicing this like, you know, Japanese religion. That's sort of interesting, you know, and it's so fun to think about, you know, the journey that my faith took to get me. Like it came from Nepal through China, down the Korean Peninsula, into Japan, across the Pacific Ocean, across the West, and then it met me in Virginia. Like that's kind of cool.
That's a very neat perspective. So, as a recent college graduate, Wyatt, how do you incorporate Buddhist principles into your daily life and decision making?
Ooh, yeah. This is definitely one that I've been thinking about for a while now. So, I am still living with my parents, shamefully. And I notice as I've become more Buddhist, I've really noticed that, you know, every family has its like spats where, you know, one family or gets angry at the other. It's nothing big, you know, it's your average stuff. But I've noticed that I try less and less to just do like the sort of like, you know, snarkiness and like the you know, nitpickiness because I'm like, that's so immature, you know. The best way to really deal with people is really, as the Buddha told us, through a compassionate lens of understanding that that person has causes and conditions that led them to be the way that they are. And so there's really no point in getting angry at anyone. You know, you just really got to let it go. You got to sit back, take those deep breaths, and come back to that person from a Buddhist perspective. And also, one thing that I've noticed that Buddhism taught me is to apologize more. I really need to learn how to apologize more. Apologizing is so underrated in today's society. Being able to say, I'm sorry. It's a beautiful thing. It really is.
That's terrific. Can you recall a significant event where your understanding of Buddhism played a crucial role in guiding your decision making or influencing your approach to a particular situation?
So I teach Dharma school, and I teach like the kindergarten class. Impermanence is a big word that a 6-year-old is not really going to be able to get. It's something that they're going to find pretty hard to comprehend. So what we do is to teach them, and we have to be patient because once again, they're 6-year-olds, so we love to run around, is we get Play-Doh and we say, make something out of the Play-Doh. And, they make whatever the kid in my school is making like squids or whatever. And we say, okay, now mush it back up, And so it's no longer in the form of a squid. It's changed, it's impermanent, but the basic form is still there. And so teaching Dharma school has really taught me a lot of like patience to dealing with people because, a lot of people are, maybe in their 30s and you still have to teach Buddhism on the level of like a kindergartner.
Wyatt, how do you envision Jodo Shinshu Buddhism contributing to community building and fostering a sense of belonging amongst Ekoji Sangha members?
Yeah. So one of the things that kind of scares me about today's society, and it's a moderate scare, I'll be honest, is you see less and less people attending, being identifying as religious and being, church attending. And there's nothing wrong with being irreligious. There's nothing wrong with that. But I see this as being sort of a larger sort of people losing their communities. And so what I really like about Ekoji is that it is very, informal. It's I know I was talking about this once with you, Andrea, that I was on the website once and I saw you had like a dress code, like business something. And I was like, I remember the first time I came to Ekoji, I was all dressed up and I was like, people here are just like wearing t-shirts and like they're in jeans, like and with Jodo Shinshu, we're very like laid back form of Buddhism. We're not like like more Theravada branches I've heard are more, strict about like this is what the Dharma is. One thing I remember going back to Dharma school, speaking of like how we're very open, is we were teaching the kids about the birth of the Buddha. We tell this story where the Buddha is born and he peacefully comes out of Maya's side and he takes 7 steps and he points up and he says, I alone in the world are. And we ask the kids, now, do you think this really happened? And the kids, they're 6 years old, but they know, no, that didn't happen. And we go, yes, it's about what it means, not what it says. And being able to say that, in a religious community, that we're not literalists. We're not telling you that this is what literally happened, but instead we're going to try to glean whatever spiritual value we can from this. And that's what people really need nowadays, is a religious community that isn't not super dogmatic, one that's open, one that wants your experiences, that will not try to invalidate them, because you're gay or because you're trans or anything that's like that. So I think Jodo Shinshu has a lot to offer.
I do too, Wyatt. One of the things I like about Ekoji is it has a big vision of the world. And in fact, one of its goals is to create a worldwide Sangha that welcomes everybody as they are. How do you see yourself contributing to that vision?
I'm definitely, I don't mean to be a bit more braggadocious, but I would say one of the more engaged members of the Ekoji Sangha. I try to help out where I can, tell people about, we're very open. We're not going to we don't judge you based off of, really anything. And we're just open, that openness is what really gets people in seats, I feel.
Wyatt, can you tell us, is there a particular Buddhist text, passage, or teaching that holds a significant meaning for you? And could you share it with our audience and explain its impact on your spiritual journey?
Yes. So the thing that got me interested in Buddhism, and I have this, it's a vivid memory. I remember I was after taking a math SOL in high school, and I brought a book for me to read after I was done, and there's still time on the clock. And the book was the Dhammapada. It's just a collection of sayings of the Buddha, and I remember reading it, and it just deeply resonated with me. And there was a specific passage, and I'm not going to be able to get it word for word correct, but how you shouldn't get joy from other people's suffering. That's a really incorrect place to get your inner joy from. And it was really powerful for me. And once again, I really feel like I'm putting this in really dumb terms, but as a kid, I really stuck with it. And I keep on coming back to the Dhammapada again and again and again, and its sayings and its wisdom. It's funny. I know that in the teaching of the Buddha, that little like orange book we always hand out, it begins with a collection. It begins with a like something from the Dhammapada right in here. So I would definitely say that has spoken to me the most out of any Buddhist text, because I've tried to read other Buddhist texts, and a lot of them are really hard to understand and wrap your mind around. They rely on a lot of technical language, but Dhammapada is just such plain language, and it cuts so clearly to the bone that you'll find something in there that'll resonate with yourself.
As you navigate the Buddhist path in this world, what ultimate goals do you have in mind for your own journey?
I mean, enlightenment, of course. Am I right? No. I hope just to live a peaceful, satisfied life. I want just to be satisfied, to not really, drive myself into places that, seeking happiness in places that it's not going to be there. I want to, I see people in my life that, I could see how Buddhism would help them. And I know that I can use its teachings to help myself. Like, in my own sort of background, there's been people who have had anger issues, for example. And I know that Buddhism can really, once again, going back to that, like, there's really no point in getting like angry at really anything. People are just these beings. They're sort of victims of their own circumstances. And so being angry at someone is kind of pointless. It's meaningless. And so being aware of that, being able to take those breaths of relaxation and just sort of, being able to let it go at the end of the day.
Thank you.
So Wyatt, what aspect of the Sunday services at Ekoji resonates most with you and why?
When it comes to Sunday services, I, of course, love the Dharma talk. That's when I try my best to practice mindfulness because, I have ADHD. And so sitting down and listening has always been a bit of a struggle for me. But I always try when someone gets up on that podium and starts speaking, that is when I am like zeroing in. I'm like trying to take in every word. And I used to do this more so because I would join your after Sunday, after service discussions. And so I would always want to have something insightful to say. I didn't want to be left empty-handed. The chanting is good for me. I don't know if I've gleaned as much from it as I should, because they say there's a sort of meditative aspect to that. Really, whenever I'm doing meditation, I'm just trying to make sure I don't mess up my words and say something that, not everyone else is saying. So, yeah, I would definitely say it's the Dharma message.
Thank you very much, Wyatt. This has been great fun. I've really appreciated it. I'm going to make one comment about chanting. I actually enjoy it. And as I sit there, I think about all the people that have chanted that particular passage in the 2,500 years prior to my being here. They chanted it, got it to me, and now I'm chanting it, hopefully to pass it on to a future generations. We've previously asked our guests about influential figures in Buddhist history. Who's been your most impactful teacher or Dharma friend at Ekoji, and how have they aided in your appreciation of the Jodo Shinshu tradition?
Well, I mean, off the bat, I got to go for Reverend Hayashi. I miss him so much. I'm trying to plan out a trip to Colorado this year to go see him. Hopefully he'll be there, fingers crossed. I'll never forget after my grandmother passed away. And I was still a pretty fresh blood to Ekoji. And I wanted to ask him, I asked him, what happens when we die? What is the Jodo Shinshu on perspective? And I had heard Ken, one of our song members, talk about the ocean and the wave. And I just didn't get that reference. It flew right over my head. I was like, what's that? And so, he sat me down, Reverend Hayashi, that is, and he told me about the wave. And I guess I should regurgitate for those who don't know. Basically, the way we see life is that you're sort of a wave cresting on top of an ocean. and eventually you're going to crash and you're going to go back into that ocean, and all the things that make you will sort of, disperse and become a part of that greater ocean. And I thought that was beautiful. And I thought, like, even if this isn't like, metaphysically true of like, like some Atman or Anatman or whatever, it's literally true. When we die, people still carry us in our heart. Our influences still go on.
So, Wyatt, we end each of our interviews with the following question. What does Ekoji mean to you?
Ekoji to me, I think, mainly means community. It means a place to go on Sunday, see familiar faces, and share in a common spiritual path. It's amazing. I mean, the amount of people that I've met through Ekoji, the amount of connections that I've had through Ekoji, it's so wonderful. It's really allowed me to blossom socially. And I'm not just going into it for, like ego satisfying, get my, social, socks off or whatever. It's a place for me to contribute to other people. It's a place for me to give back. We talk about dana, and I try my best to give my dana through whether it be volunteering or just bettering the Sangha, because I know it has so much to offer for everyone.
So, thank you for joining us on this episode of Echo Ekoji. Please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and watch us on YouTube. A special thanks to Wyatt Spage for sharing his insights with us. Visit ekoji.org and BuddhistChurchesOfAmerica.org for additional resources on Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. Remember, Ekoji strives to build a worldwide Sangha through our diverse services and programs. With Gotchy, I'm Andrea Chapman, expressing our gratitude for your support. Namo Amida Butsu.